It's hard for us to talk about terrorism and to talk about radical Islam and to talk about radical jihad, but we have to because it exists in the world. So what I'm trying to do with my work is to take this information and to give it to the gay community and to give it to the progressive community in a way that's palatable. And liberal people, progressive young people aren't learning about this. And unfortunately, this conversation has only been talked about really on Fox News and in right-wing circles. Like Republicans in America, things are very polarized in America.
And how does that feel for you to suddenly find yourself on the side of Fox News and right-wing discourse in America?
Well, I'm not on that side, but they have the information that we need.
Shalom and welcome to this special Pride Month special edition of State of the Nation. I'm Eylon Levy. As a power Jew, it's my job to help people understand how to fight for Israel and the Jewish people, how to support the fight against the Hamas death cult and for the hostages, making the case that Israel is the only liberal democracy in the Middle East, because it is, and we're fighting for the rights of our citizens to live in peace and security against the fundamentalist regime in Iran and its terrorist proxy armies. Because Israel's fight is not our fight alone. We have friends and allies who understand that Israel's fight is the world's fight. Zionism is liberation. As a power gay, comedian Daniel-Ryan Spaulding is an ally fighting that same fight across the queer world. Because he came to Israel for the parties and somehow found himself fighting for Western civilization. After 10/7, his videos went viral with his excoriating, withering put-downs of those celebrating Hamas's atrocities, trying to make liberals around the world understand that if you support liberation and equality against violence and oppression, then Israel's fight is your fight. This episode isn't afraid to get down and dirty, so I tell your kids to pop off to bed now if bawdy sexual innuendo isn't something you want them listening to just yet. Welcome to State of a Nation.
Breaking news out of Israel this morning.
Shocking hostage taking.
Hundreds of Israelis are dead.
I want to bring in Israeli government spokesman.
Eylon.
What happens when the 4-day pause?
How do you resolve this? Where does this go?
Daniel-Ryan Spaulding, welcome to State of a Nation.
Thank you, Eylon Levy.
And welcome back to Israel.
Thank you for having me.
You enjoyed the Viv so much, is what you call Tel Aviv?
I'm all about the Viv.
And Jerusalem, what are we calling that now?
Jeruz.
And you were in Haifa as well. What are we calling that? What was the Haif like?
It was something else.
In a good way or a bad way?
I love it. I love Israel. It's
yeah.
diverse, it's interesting, it's a fantastic country.
Because this isn't your first time here. You've been here how many times?
I lived in Berlin for a number of years, and I became friends with Israelis there. And I started visiting Israel in 2020. So the past 4 or 5 years, I've been visiting.
And what brings you to Israel this time?
This time, I'm here doing shows. I'm here, supporting the gay community and, letting people see the truth of the country. And, I want to be interviewing people and talking with people and showing people, how wonderful it is here and what amazing people are here.
And you've been getting an amazing reception from Israeli audiences. And I know that because you were very kind to invite me to your show last time you were in Israel. I mean, the sexual innuendo and the jokes you did while pointing at me in the front row were a little bit embarrassing.
Yeah.
But you're getting this rock star reception from Israeli audiences, not only because you're a top-class comedic talent, but also because since the beginning of this war, you've really been sticking your neck out in non-Jewish spaces, in queer spaces, in hostile spaces to Israel, making the case for Israel. And you really came on my radar in the early days of the war with some very spunky videos. I want to just watch a couple of them when I first noticed, who is this guy who is suddenly speaking up for Israel while we're under attack?
I think it's a little ironic that the people who seem to be defending Hamas online are also the ones they'd be most likely to kill. Oh, no, I'm sure the Islamic terrorists would love you, queer intellectual feminist. We're freedom fighters. They're fighting for their land, and I'm fighting for my right to purple hair. What the f***? It's like a girl in a really toxic relationship. I know you don't like him because he kidnaps and murders people, but trust me, when I'm alone with him, he is such a sweetheart. I'm sorry if your reaction to people being slaughtered, beheaded, and burned alive isn't complete and utter disgust and horror, if your reaction is, yeah, but I mean, why? See it from their perspective. You need to get your fucking head checked, okay? I'm sure Jeffrey Dahmer had a rough childhood. That doesn't mean I empathize with him. If you want to free Palestine from Hamas.
This was a wonderful clip on 10th of October, and you could tell it really came from the heart. I mean, this came from a place of anger.
Yeah, I started to see this sort of bubbling, this propaganda of, well, what about the context? You have to put it into historical context. It's more of an uprising. Palestine has the right to defend itself. And I was so horrified by this idea that this was somehow a justified attack, that this was somehow like resistance or freedom fighting. And to me, this was very clearly a terrorist attack. And I was just so, something really like awoke inside of me. And also,
I think woke is the wrong word in this context.
Well, yeah, it ignited something in me. And I felt this, I also felt a danger to it. I felt like this is a very dangerous idea. Like if people genuinely think this, if people think that terrorism is acceptable, this is very bad for our society and for our world. So I felt this like in my bones, I felt this this feeling that I needed to say this.
And we have another clip here also from very early on in the war that I've been quoting verbatim because I think it's so funny.
Pinkwashing is a term that angry, jealous, purple-haired girls like to throw around anytime fabulous gay guys get along with Jews. Call me crazy, but I'd rather be at a circuit party in Tel Aviv getting head than in the Gaza Strip getting beheaded.
Yeah, not the most family-friendly episode that we've ever had. But, so you're feeling this anger inside your bones, and it's an anger not only about what Hamas did, but an anger about how people in the West are seeing this, condoning, making excuses, even glorifying the atrocities. And is this the moment where you suddenly look around the society around you and say, what the hell? I didn't know that you were all messed up ideologically in this way. Did the reaction to October 7th come as a surprise to you?
Yeah, I was very surprised. And I didn't know that really what I was touching upon in this moment was an ideological subversion of our society and of the West. And an indoctrination, an intentional indoctrination, specifically focused on the left and these sort of intersectional spaces, the queer world, the feminist world, that this has been an indoctrination that's happened for quite a while.
The fact that somehow Hamas, a virulently homophobic regime, has somehow become idolized by queer spaces?
I think that, I think not necessarily idolized. I think that is definitely, in extreme cases, that is true. But just the idea of this sort of collective idea of our oppression is universal, that we are not free until everyone is free. And what I realized is that this has been a very long indoctrination process. And I, in some way, used to think these thoughts. Before I actually came to Israel, I didn't really know much about the conflict. I didn't know the history of the region. From what I had ever heard or absorbed, it was never explained to me that Palestinian leadership were terrorists. Anytime people talked about the conflict, it was always described in the way that there's Palestine and there's Israel, and Israel oppresses Palestine, and Israel oppresses Palestine, and Gaza is an open-air prison, and they're locked in this open-air prison, and the West Bank is occupied, and they're locked in by this big border wall, and Israel is oppressing them because they want apartheid, and they don't want those people to have a nation, and they don't want those people to have a land, and they don't want people to have a nation. The Palestinians are oppressed. That was always the message that I was getting. And I, up until I came here, I thought that it was true. I thought that the nation was an apartheid nation. I thought that these people were oppressed by Israel. And I think that a lot of the reasons why this whole boycott Israel movement and the idea of pinkwashing, the idea of discrediting gay men who come here as sex tourists, not that we aren't sex tourists, but this homophobic idea of, you're pinkwashing, you just come to Israel, you don't care about the human rights abuses of their government. All of this is to prevent people from coming to Israel and learning the truth, which is that Palestinian leadership are terrorists. They're radical Islamic terrorists. And that open-air prison is not an open-air prison. It's a security border on the land of both Israel and Egypt to prevent this terrorist regime that is in this little nation of Gaza, which they could have made a nation but decided not to keep those terrorists from coming in and killing everyone. That's the open-air prison. It's a security border between Israel and Egypt. So, and the occupation in the West Bank is because of all the terrorism there. And it's an occupation that they agreed to. And the reason they haven't been able to move past that is because of the terrorism there, because their leadership are terrorists. That was never explained to me.
And something that seems so obvious, and I'm glad that you have that clarity, and it saddens me to hear that you see this, the allegations of pinkwashing when Israel talks about its record on gay rights as an attempt to, cover up nefarious human rights abuses. I can't think of any better example of pinkwashing than what groups like Queers for Palestine do by covering up the Hamas homophobic regime and covering up its own abuses as a way to continue waging a political war against Israel. We have a clip here that went viral a while ago. I will never for the life of me understand how Hamas became a drag icon. Here you have just a confluence of some very weird trends going on in America, of a drag queen story hour, as the drag queen in this, I think it's public library in America, is teaching children how to chant Free Palestine. Let's watch.
Today what we're going to do is we're going to shout, Free Palestine. Can I hear that? Free Palestine! If you're a drag queen and you know it, shout, Free Palestine! If you're a drag queen and you know it and you really want to show it, you're a drag queen and you know it, shout, Free Palestine! Excellent!
Okay, maybe I fell asleep in the 19th century.
Yeah.
Help me understand. What is going on here? How did we get to this situation where instead of gay people and queer people opposing the Palestinians' terrorist leadership, we have them taking the side of this terrorist group against the most liberal country in the Middle East?
It's a slow-moving indoctrination. It's an indoctrination through the arts. So a lot of this propaganda has been created through this sort of virtue signaling. A lot of these new, I would call them Nazi propagandists, because Hamas is a Nazi, an Islamic Nazi group. Their intention is to commit genocide against the Jewish people. That is their stated purpose. I would consider them Nazis. The PFLP was funded by Nazis like Francois Giraud. Hitler collaborated with the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. Interestingly enough, his granddaughter, I believe it's his granddaughter, Sarah Saleh, is one of these spoken word Palestinian poets. And she has the poetry of her generation. And she has this one poem called Say Free Palestine. And it's sort of this indoctrination, this intentional indoctrination of the arts, the intentional indoctrination of this whole sort of communist Marxist idea of we are not free until we're all free. And if you are someone who's uneducated, if you are someone who has been told constantly that Israel is an apartheid state, Israel is a colonialist state, this complete distortion of reality, this complete distortion of history, and you see all these brown people who are, who are telling you through spoken word poetry and sharing their story of oppression, you are blindly going to follow them. It's a tactic that has been employed for quite a long time now, and it's been this framework there's been this whole framework, especially with all the propaganda from these Qatari news agencies like Al Jazeera, all of this propaganda flowing in from social media. People have a completely different perception of Israel and this conflict than what the reality is.
Your voice, one voice among many, but I'm wondering how Israel can begin to fight back against the fact that being anti-Israel has become part of the bundle of progressive causes. If you're pro-climate justice and you're against police brutality and you want racial equality and you support LGBT rights, being anti-Israel falls in that same basket. How does Israel begin to disentangle it and say, actually, being on the side of Israel is being on the same side as those fighting for LGBT equality?
Right. You need to invest a lot in bringing people to Israel, and also just on the information war. There was not enough done to combat this misinformation over the past 10 years.
While this is happening outside the context of an actual war.
Because now truth doesn't matter. Truth is subjective. Yeah. People live in echo chambers, and we live in this sort of...
And I mean, that's a bigger challenge than however much money Israel wants to throw at the information war. We're never going to change the fact that we live in a world where people live in echo chambers and truth doesn't matter anymore.
But truth does matter in the actual physical world. And truth does matter in terms of the powers of the structures of society and Western civilization, and the fact that we want to keep democracy alive. And we can't let Israel fall if we want democracy to continue existing. And I think that it's worth the fight. We have to do whatever we can.
And you spent a long time living in Berlin as well. And from what I understand, Berlin has become a especially toxic environment for Jews and Israelis, especially within special liberal and progressive circles. What were you hearing from friends and acquaintances in Berlin before October 7th about Israel, since October 7th?
Well, after I started visiting Israel, it actually took me a while to fully grasp the concepts and the circumstances and the history of what was actually here. I remember it was only until my second visit where I felt comfortable enough to ask an Israeli, like, can you explain the conflict to me? And I learned that, Palestinian leadership had turned down every single peace deal they were ever offered, including one in 2014. I didn't know that. I didn't know they ever could have had the option of having a nation. I knew that Jews were the indigenous people of this region, but I still didn't really understand this whole idea of it being a refugee state and the idea of Zionism being about, let's have a Jewish homeland, but not exclusively Jewish. Minorities still have equal rights here. I didn't even fully really understand the fact that that Palestinian leadership were terrorists and that terrorists lie. It didn't click with me.
But in Berlin, help me understand the atmosphere.
So in Berlin, there are a lot of Israelis, and Germans are very pro-Israel, and they're very they get so much Holocaust education. But in this sort of international hipster scene, this international community, that is not the case. And a lot of these people are, living, I hate to be judgmental, but they're living a life that's sort of a little bit aimless and a little bit, about the party scene and about the drug scene. And they're not so attached to objective reality. They're sort of living in this ideological reality where words mean whatever they want them to mean. And so you can get hooked into these sort of extremist, radicalized ideas when you're not so attached and grounded to reality and to life. So unfortunately, this whole like queer hipster scene in Berlin has become viciously anti-Semitic and viciously anti-Israel. And it's very unfortunate to see, especially because Germany, for the most part, has been amazingly supportive of Israel. And I think that it's really hard for a lot of Germans to see and to deal with.
It takes a lot of bravery to try to take that out of the basket of progressive causes and say, I'm progressive, I'm pro-gay rights, and therefore I stand with Israel. And I know that a lot of Jews in entertainment fear that speaking up for Israel at this point will cost them socially, professionally, even to the point of career suicide. And I'm wondering, have you experienced pushback? Have you been paying a price? Has that been a consideration?
Well, I think that a lot of the stars have lined up for me in terms of this. I had been planning for a year to move to New York, and my moving date was October 16th. So I did this first video on October 11th, and then I quickly left Berlin and was in New York. And
you've been here most of the time since.
Well, no, I've only been here twice since. But in New York, I was.
You leave a presence.
Thank you. I was living in I was living in Crown Heights, which is like the most Jewish part of New York. And right away, because I had done that video, all the new friends that I met were either Jewish or Israeli. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't in Berlin, and I didn't have to deal with any sort of social consequences.
But as a comedian now trying to sell tickets, does it hurt you or help you that you're now seen as, a great defender of the Jews?
Well, I'm a great defender of human rights and humanity. And I believe that no one should be hateful to a group of people because of their race or their gender or who they are. I am against hate more than anything. And those are my values. And that's what I stand for. And if you have a problem with that, then you might want to examine yourself. But what I was trying to say was that because all of a sudden I was in New York, I didn't experience any social backlash. So I was able to keep going. Whereas some celebrities might have, been in danger of losing their career, losing followers. For me, it was all just sort of internet noise. I was just living my life and saying.
And you've learned how to drown that out a little bit.
Yeah, and just saying what I thought. This entire time, I've just done what I thought was right the whole time and said what I thought was right.
Now, you've not only been speaking through your own voice as Daniel-Ryan Spaulding, you have a whole new act. Can we call it your drag persona, this purple-haired girl? A whole new character. Right. So purple-haired girl is your drag name?
No.
What is your drag name?
I don't have a drag name. I'm cisgender.
Okay, so this is your
old school.
This is your alternate personality,
right.
Purple-haired girl.
Yeah.
We've created this series to try to rebut some of the more ridiculous, but unfortunately very common allegations against Israel. Let's watch one of the clips.
Oh, right.
October 7th was armed resistance.
Hi, I'm Mr. Daniel, and this is my friend, the purple hair girl. She's not a bad person, but she's been radicalized to become a raging Jew hater, and we want to help her.
Hello, Zionist pinkwasher. Do you like my new poster? Babies are occupiers too. Free Palestine by any means necessary.
So tell me, why are you picking on purple-haired girls?
Well, I feel like when I created Purple Hair Girl, I wanted to find a way that was funny and entertaining to mirror that back at them. And actually, Purple Hair Girl overall is sort of a clown. She's actually not as mean as most of these people. I basically was sort
You're
of...
saying you're being kind to them.
Well, I think that's not as bad as most of them are. But I was thinking about who could sort of solve a problem this big, and I started to think about Mr. Rogers. And so Purple Hair Girl is sort of a children's show where I, as Mr. Daniel in this sort of cute sweater vest, try to explain to my friend Purple Hair Girl why she shouldn't be a raging terrorist supporting anti-Semite. Yeah.
And why are they?
Because anti-Semitism is a scapegoating mechanism for a group of people or for an individual or for a nation that is not functioning properly, that is not happy with itself. And so whatever you hate about your society or about yourself, you project onto the Jews. So if you have white guilt, if you have white privilege that you're uncomfortable with, living in a society that is a colonialist society, that has a system, that has a history of racism. That
right,
has...
the irony of people chanting, no justice on stolen land as they cross the Brooklyn Bridge. That irony was not lost on us.
If you have all of these pent-up feelings of guilt about your own society, instead of dealing with that and examining your own country, it's very easy to take that and project it onto the Jews.
But these are people who say that they're very critical of their own countries as well.
Well, clearly not enough so, but definitely a lot of this is coming from people who are Marxists. And this is something that has been another part of this propaganda and part of this larger plan to take down the West.
And is Purple-Haired Girl simply a comic personality to poke fun at these people, or is it an educational tool? Are purple-haired girls watching your videos lampooning Purple-Haired Girl?
I think so. Like, definitely, I didn't realize how much it would trigger them and upset them. But for me, Purple-Haired Girl wasn't so much to educate them. It was to educate people in relationships with purple-haired girls. Because I believe that the only way people can change their minds is through connection and through friendships and through relationships. So I figured the purple-haired girls were too poisoned to take in new information. But if I could educate people that they're in relationships with who are sort of sick of them and would get a kick out of making fun out of them and give them the information that they need to have these conversations with the purple-haired girls in their lives, that was my intention.
And so as Israel and Jewish people increasingly face hostility within these progressive spaces, for those who want to be allies, for those who want to help and educate people, what do you think the best ways are for them to do that?
I think the best way for them to do that is to understand the larger political implications of all of this. That it's not about Israel, that it's not about Jews. It just starts with Jews. And that this is more about the idea that if you can destroy Israel, if you can destroy the only democracy in the Middle East, if you can isolate it, if you can destroy its relationships with all the other Western democracies, if you can take down Israel, you can take down all of democracy. And that's really what this is about. This is the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is Russia, this is China.
And that's an important clarification because I know many Iranians who despise the regime, hate it when you say Iran, because they're like, no, that's my country. The Islamic regime that hijacked my country is something else.
Yeah, we love the people of Iran. It's not a war against them. No. It's against the terrorist regime that's taken them hostage. All of these things we need to learn about. And liberal people, progressive young people aren't learning about this. And unfortunately, this conversation has only been talked about really on Fox News and in right-wing circles. Like Republicans in America, things are very polarized in America.
And how does that feel for you to suddenly find yourself on the side of Fox News and right-wing discourse in America?
Well, I'm not on that side, but they have the information that we need. It's not so much that their information is, you know, these are opinions these are factual things that they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's just that we aren't getting this information because no one is listening to them. So what I'm trying to do with my work is to take this information and to give it to the gay community and to give it to the progressive community in a way that's palatable. It's hard for us to talk about terrorism and to talk about radical Islam and to talk about radical jihad, but we have to because it exists in the world. And if I can talk about it through the lens of talking about human rights and talking about gay rights and talking about all the abuses that these regimes have created and the oppression of women and the oppression of gay people, you know, why aren't we talking about that? Why is it that the only conversation in the Middle East is this idea of, you know, let's talk about, you know, this war as if Israel is committing a genocide when it clearly isn't committing a genocide. And let's talk about the death and suffering of people through the unintentional consequences of a war that Israel didn't even want. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, why not actually talk about the fact that Hamas is a terrorist regime and talk about what they've done to their people? Let's talk about what happens in Iran to women who show a little bit of hair and someone who does a rap song critical of their government. Let's talk about these actual human rights abuses and the reason why there is no peace in the Middle East. Let's empower Arab voices who are trying to speak out against this.
I'm fascinated to hear you talk about this because for so many Israelis, Jews, supporters of Israel, the idea of fighting for Israel is sometimes very inward looking, okay? This is about us. But the way you speak is saying, look, this isn't about you. I like you guys. I want to step in and save you guys. But this is about truth. This is about democracy. You had a great line in the show, and I recommend anyone who can catch you on the comedy circuit to do that. You said, you know, I came to Israel for the parties and found out I'm here to save Western civilization.
Yeah.
I mean, is that not going a little bit too far? I mean, are those the stakes? Are those the stakes
100%.
in the information war being waged against Israel?
100%. 100%. That is what is happening. Because these radical Islamist terrorist regimes like the RII, like the Muslim Brotherhood, they think long term. Like, even if this war stops next week, all of this anti-Semitism and all of this anti-Zionism, all this hatred of Israel, that has now been embedded in the memories of these little children at that drag queen story hour. These kids who have been in college, they have this memory of Palestine being oppressed and Israel committing a genocide.
But it's a memory of a false thing.
It is a memory of a false thing, but it's still going to influence their future. It's going to influence how they see the world. The fact that unless we challenge it, and unless we speak up against it, and unless we correct it, these people are going to hate Israel or be anti-Semitic towards Jews for a very long time. It's going to influence all of society, and we can't allow that. I truly believe that the Middle East deserves to have a renaissance, and it deserves to have human rights, and it deserves to have democracy, and that's going to be achieved through combating anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And it's a big undertaking, but I believe that it's possible.
That's fascinating to hear you put it that way. And I hope that for viewers and listeners who want to defend Israel, they remember that there is a bigger picture out here, and that Israel stands for these values of freedom and equality and truth as well, and these things matter.
Absolutely, and you guys want to be at peace with your neighbors. This is the thing that people don't understand. Like, Israel wants to be at peace with their neighbors. They want to have peace with Palestinians in the same way they have with Egypt and with Jordan. Like, people don't.
Well, we'd like to have a warm peace and not the kind of cold peace we have with the governments of Egypt and Jordan, whose populations are still largely hostile to
exactly.
Israel.
You want to like live a good life, and we should be advocating for that.
Before we wrap up, I want to play a game with you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
It's a game show, and our game show is called, drumroll, Queer Eye for the Terror Guy. Now, there is a chance that we may both get fatwa'd for what we are about to do now, but I've already understood that's the price.
We're so past that.
We're so past that. So I want to show you here some of our favorite terrorist leaders, and I want you to tell me whether you'd swipe right, swipe left, and specifically what gay subcategory you would put them in.
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay, so the first person we have here, we are so getting fatwa'd for this, is fabulous contestant number one, Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip.
I do like that silk scarf. That's nice.
The green silk
I like
scarf.
the green. I love an emerald green. That's nice.
Do you think this color suits his skin tone?
Actually, it's not the worst look. But you can see just in his face how ugly he is. Like what's in his heart is
on
in
the inside.
his face.
He definitely has evil eyes. What category?
Hideous.
I mean, does that count as a bear? What is he?
He would be. Well, yeah, depending upon how hairy he is.
Okay.
We'd have to look at his chest.
Right.
He could be, I would say he's a silver daddy because he still has the salt and pepper in his beard, which is very attractive with Turkish and Arab men or Persian guys when they have that caramel skin and the salt and pepper hair. But he is, a monster and evil.
So maybe we don't want to see him with his shirt off. So we're swiping left or right?
We're not going to him, no.
Okay, congratulations. It's a match.
No!
Okay, sorry. Coming up next, we have another leader from Hamas. It's Ismail Haniyeh, the chairman of Hamas's political bureau. What do we make of him?
Well, he's a little more put together than the other guy. He looks more like, he has like a diabolicalness to him. Definitely, I think, he has a little bit of salt and pepper in the mustache. They like their beards. For this, I would say we're going polar bear.
Polar bear?
Yeah,
what's a polar bear?
A polar bear is a bear who's like older and like white, like has white hair and is gray and stuff. Because he's a little heavier set than Sinwar, so I would say polar bear.
Okay, Ismail Haniyeh, a polar bear. We're just going to swipe. Congratulations! It's a match.
No, I don't want to any of these terrorists.
Who do we have next? Coming up next, we're going to a different. We have Hassan Nasrallah.
They're just with fucking ugly as
cheeky look.
Yeah, so he would be a chub daddy, I would say.
A chub daddy.
Yeah, because he has chubby cheeks. So definitely, these guys could be at bear bars for sure. When I was heavier, I would go to these bear bars, and I just hated it so much. I'm not into that bear world.
No, definitely not. If Hassan Nasrallah is there hitting on you at the bar.
I'm a power gay. I'm a twink.
Who do we have next with Mr. It's also a match. Congratulations.
I know.
Who do you were very complimentary towards him. Who do we have next? We have none other. We have Abdul Malik Al-Houthi, the leader of the Houthi movement, not salt and pepper, dark hair.
See, these Houthis they're a little more good-looking than the Palestinian terrorists. No, he actually reminds me of a guy that I dated who's Berber, and Berbers and Yemenites have really big. That's the thing. Did you know that? Yemeni guys have big. It's true, they do.
We're going to have to cut this.
No, it's good. I would say he's, so what would he be? I would say he's a daddy. Yeah.
And a fabulous outfit as well.
Oh, I do like that.
Intricate blue.
I love that. That's a nice shade on me. That's a nice color of blue on me.
And it says there is 1 kilometer away. Oh. And do we have congratulations, it's a match. And do we have another round, or does that bring us? It's Ali Khamenei himself, the supreme leader of Iran, who, by the way, in a different outfit could easily pass for Sephardi chief rabbi of Israel.
Yes. So that would be a granddaddy, I guess.
A granddaddy.
Like it would be like these twinks who have like daddy issues. Like they would be into him. But he looks so disgusting. Like I could just imagine him. Like
we're gonna have
so
to cut
gross.
This. We can't. This is a family friendly show. No, on that note, cut. Daniel-Ryan Spaulding, very good to have you on the show. For those who want to follow you and your fantastic comedy, how can they follow you and watch your shows?
Daniel-Ryan Spaulding on social media, Power Gay.
And are you planning comedy shows around the world?
Of course, always.
What do you have lined up?
Well, right now, I will be mainly in the United States. Once the Intifada revolution calms down in Europe, I'll probably be able to perform there again. As long as democracy doesn't fall apart and the world fall apart.
Minor issues.
I'll be around.
As minor issues, and as long as we survive this episode. Daniel-Ryan Spaulding, thank you very much for joining me on State of a Nation. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of State of a Nation. I think a short one, depending on how much of that content our producers had to cut out and leave on the cutting room floor. As always, if you enjoyed that, please follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe on all social media platforms. Share it with all of your friends. And join us soon. We'll be back with more episodes that take you beyond the headlines. Between the lines, a good couple of jokes in the middle. I'm Eylon Levy, and thanks for watching.